You're listening to Living Free, your podcast for a life full of freedom and magic. I'm your host, Tanja Hirsch, and I hope that every time you listen, you feel a little bit more inspired to follow your intuition and to create a life beyond your wildest dreams. Welcome back to the Living Free podcast. I'm so grateful you're listening, and today you can expect a really inspiring interview with my friend Josh Munoz. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And we talk about why the leap of faith might be the most important step of your journey. And Josh is a really inspiring person. I met him here in Moorea, and he lives in Hawaii on his sailing boat, and he's a underwater photographer and a freedive instructor, and he shares his story how he ended up living this life full of freedom and magic. And we dive into all the things what the ocean has taught him, because he's very connected to the ocean, and why he's so passionate about freediving and underwater photography. And he shares his very personal story of being diagnosed with cancer by the age of 12 and losing a friend, and how all these things impacted him because he was so young when all of this happened. And we talk about health and why it's our biggest blessing and we should never take it for granted. And yeah, I hope this interview inspires you to take the leap of faith, however that may look for you right now. Maybe it's a big step, maybe it's a small step, but to not allow that your fear is holding you back, and to really take the next move, and that you can create the life of your wildest dreams. And Josh is really a living example of that everything is possible in this life if you take action and you find the courage to take the leap of faith. So without further ado, I welcome Josh Munoz to the podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Josh. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very inspiring, like we just talked about. But running a podcast it's very inspiring.
Yeah. So the first question I would love to ask you is, what does living free mean to you?
This is the one that you didn't give me the
Yeah.
the question to before we started. What does living free mean to me? I think sometimes living free would mean like not thinking too much about the future and maybe what might hold you back. Like starting a podcast, for instance. Might be scary to start, but if you don't think about like future things, or like think of like the roadblocks that might get in the way, then like what would stop you from just like starting tomorrow or today? I think living free, I mean, like almost as cliche as it sounds, but it's like, okay, this sounds really cliche, but almost like the YOLO lifestyle. You only live once or something, but like truly, like if you break that apart, just like living your life without, I think, judgment or like being scared of what other people think is like what probably living free for me would be.
Beautiful answer. And I think that's what it is, right? We feel most free if we are being present in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you just said, many people can resonate with that we always are so much in our heads that we don't take action and we don't freely express ourselves because we want to be 100% sure, want to feel ready. But we have to put ourselves out there to get started. And what helps with that is if you learn to trust yourself by looking back on what you've already accomplished. You know, like you already did a podcast and you've been great at it. And to see, oh wow, I've been good at so many things and I already accomplished so many things. So I learned to trust myself to do it again and again. So for those of my listeners who don't know you, can you tell a little bit about your personal life's journey? How did you end up living this life, which we will dive into, which is really amazing?
Hopefully I don't answer this too long. My name is Josh Munoz, born and raised in Arizona. I was homeschooled up until high school. So I think that helped. My parents were very smart. Set me up for a good career path. Went to college, stayed in college for Arizona. But my senior year, just after senior year, I made the move to Hawaii. So now I live in Oahu, in Honolulu. I started working on the water and very much became so passionate about the ocean and working in the water and just working with wildlife, and picked up underwater photography. I now live on a sailboat. I've lived on my sailboat for the last 3 years. I love sailing. I've crossed a couple oceans before, doing some really cool things. Sailing to San Francisco and sailing to Tahiti last year. And now I teach freediving. I'm an underwater photographer and a boat captain in Hawaii. So that's a very fast introduction.
That's so amazing. And I think you show people just by living this life and by being you what's possible. You know, so many people feel stuck in their lives and feel like they have to devote themselves to the life they chose at one point, but we can always choose different. And you're only, how old are you? 27, 20?
27.
Yeah, 27, and you live on a sailboat and you share your passion. How amazing is that? That's really a big inspiration.
A lot of those things too, I never had planned. I never had in my 5-year plan, oh yeah, I'll be in Hawaii and I'll be a sailor and I'll live on this sailboat and I'm gonna pick up underwater photography. Those were never things that were in my 5-year plan. And I think kind of where you had started to of living free, the biggest change that I made in my life that I definitely saw a lot of growth for me personally was when I think decided to live that free lifestyle of, I was so scared to buy a one-way ticket and sell everything I owned and move to Hawaii. But, hindsight looking back, it's been just the best thing that I've done. And I've only been in Hawaii for 5 years now. But I love it. And I'm so glad that I did make that change. And definitely buying that ticket, I think, is the hardest step in all of it, and actually committing.
Oh, 100%.
Moving through with it. But it's the hardest step. But then the money and the job and the friends and the place to live, all those things absolutely will fall into place once you make that step.
So when you go back 5 years, the day you arrived in Hawaii, did you have a plan, or did you just follow what made you go there in the first place?
So growing up in Arizona, it's always nice to get out of Arizona for the summertime. So I worked at different summer camps throughout my life growing up, either as a camper or as a worker. And so anyways, kind of long story short, I heard of camps in Hawaii. So I was like, oh, this would be super cool. There's a camp in Hawaii. Who wouldn't want to work in Hawaii for the summer? So I moved to Hawaii the summer before I moved there full time. I worked in Hawaii the summer before I moved there full time. And so when I went back home and I was working full time in an office, all I could think of was Hawaii and how much I missed living 20 steps from the beach and never wearing shoes and never wearing a shirt. So I did give myself a little bit of time to figure out some things moving, or some things before I did my move to Hawaii. So I was super fortunate that I did meet someone in Arizona who helped me get a job interview the day that I landed, though. So I flew into Hawaii and I had a friend pick me up from the airport. So he took my bags and he dropped me off at a moped store where I bought a moped. And I remember asking the guy that worked at the moped shop, and I'm still good friends with this guy, which is really cool. But I asked Fedor and I was like, bro, is Hawaii really as difficult to live in as everyone says? And he said, if you live like a tourist, you'll stay as long as a tourist. And I kind of took that to heart of okay, yeah, that don't go, party down in Waikiki every night and don't go shopping and spending all your money on all these things. Hawaii has so much to offer that's free or cheaper. So he told me that. I remember, so I bought my moped, and right after that I drove just kind of down the road and had an interview and landed my first job. I think I even drove to another store. I drove to a Hollister because I worked at Hollister for a while in Arizona, and I applied there also just as a backup job in case if the first job didn't work out.
But it worked out. Yeah,
the first job worked out, and it was working on a tour boat as a photographer with dolphins out on the west coast of Oahu.
And that's where you fell in love.
And that is where, yeah, the underwater career really got started. I was never a free diver. I didn't even think I knew freediving was a sport. I just thought you were either snorkeling or scuba diving. And so absolutely, I fell in love with freediving and just fell more in love with wildlife, working with dolphins every morning. And just, yeah, I mean, even seeing like the joy that they brought people, you know, we'd have tourists save their whole lives or something, come out to swim with dolphins, and it like changed their life. And I was like, wow, yeah, like I think that this also kind of changed my life, just being able to be in the water every day.
What did it change for you to work with dolphins or to be around dolphins and the ocean so much at that time?
I think it was just seeing the potential for other jobs in life, even because before that, I was working almost for a year as a graphic designer in an office that was just a very boring office. I didn't have windows. My office was locked. So like I was the only one that had the key to my office because we had such expensive camera gear and printing gear. So no one could stop by and just say, "Oh, hey Josh, like how's it going? How was your weekend?" Like no one talked. And no offense to my boss if he ever hears this, but I just saw him as just a boring person. And I felt like if I had stayed in that office, that's who I was going to become. So I think like, you know, having this job outside, that really changed a perspective for me, just to see that, oh man, there are different career paths that people can take. And you don't have to do the, you know, we would call it the American dream.
Yeah.
You get a perfect, like a 9-to-5 job, and you marry the perfect girl, and you have a white picket fence and this perfect house, because that's how a lot of people think.
How did your dream change when you moved to Hawaii? What's your dream at this moment?
Right now, what's my dream?
Do you want to continue this life like it is now and see where it's unfolding, or do you have a vision where you see yourself in a few years?
Okay, I guess the way that I would answer this question is, I used to always have a 5-year plan, and I kind of talked about that before. And for sure, my 5-year plan was to marry the girl and to get the white picket fence house and to have the perfect job. And like I said, even before we started, Hawaii was never on my plan. Hawaii was never in that 5-year plan because I just never thought that it was possible. So I guess I always wanted to try to move away from, okay, I don't want to make this like 5-year plan and I have to do these things, but I really looked at like, okay, what's my 5-year, like, yeah, like what are my goals, or like what are the things that I'm working towards? I think for me, just as an underwater photographer, I don't even know what the goal is, because I don't think I know what the potential is, but I want to just keep pursuing underwater photography and seeing where that can take me. And I feel, you know, more successful every year. I can work here in Tahiti. I work in Morea during the whale season. One of the best jobs I might ever have in my life, of being able to go out and swim with humpback whales every day and photographing them with clients and with friends. Yeah, what are the other goals? I felt, I guess, really accomplished more recently, because I had other goals. There was some goals in athletics and freediving and running that I had accomplished. I had a big goal of getting my captain's license, and I did that recently. So I think there's times right now that I'm like kind of going back to my goal list to see what I should be pursuing. But I think for right now, it's trying to see where underwater photography could take me.
So beautiful. And I think it's so important to appreciate where we already are, because we're so good at rushing at the next thing, but really to see how far you've come already and how much you've grown. So important. So it sounds very beautiful. So you go into the water basically every single day, right? You live on a sailboat in Hawaii, and now these 3 months you've spent your time in Morea going diving with the humpback whales, which was a really magical experience. I joined you one day and was, oh my god, just being close to them, I can't find the words for it. It was so magical. The energy was kind of majestic and calm and peaceful at the same time. Did you learn something from being around the whales every single day for such a long time? Did they show you something, or can you feel something changed?
that's a good question. I think the big change that I had, and I think maybe I discovered it just recently, because working with tourists and working with friends and even having like you out, I always have this really high sense of like pressure of like, oh my gosh, like these people, they paid all this money, they want to see whales, and all they want to do is have this epic interaction, and you know, maybe they saw my photos and I have like some amazing picture and they want that, but you know, that's not always the case. So I think like, I don't know, not to say, oh, the whales taught me patience and all these things, but I think I've just found more of a sense of like beauty with wildlife, because I think it's a blessing and an honor like every time that they make themselves present to us. And anytime, because if they wanted to, they could always swim away. They're so much faster than us. So I think I just had to learn to like kind of take a step back and not feel so much pressure or like anxiety almost. And you need to tell that to the clients right away, and, you know, tell you, hey, like if there's wild animals that we're working with. So I definitely think that I've learned more a sense of patience and almost, I guess, like calming, to just be calm and let the wildlife interact how the wildlife wants to interact. And sorry, we're turning this into a Freedive underwater podcast now.
No, we're gonna dive deeper soon.
Oh, yes, okay.
We're still on the surface with the whales.
With the whales.
Okay, so let's dive one step deeper from the whales that are mostly on the surface, right, to the freediving part. Because I don't have much experience with it. I just do breath work, and I think it's really close connected, because you have to be aware of your breath, and you have to be super present to be able to do it. Can you talk a little bit about the freediving part? What made you fall in love with it? Why you're so passionate about it, and what maybe has changed for you also?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I never knew freediving. Freediving was a sport. I thought you were snorkeling or you were scuba diving. I think what first attracted me to it was just to see like coworkers diving so deep in the ocean, and I never thought it was possible that I could dive down to 50 feet and grab the sand from, you know, those depths. I kind of always thought that was like impossible or something. Growing up in Arizona, I did a lot of rock climbing, and I felt like in rock climbing you really need to be in tune with your breathing and with your mind, because once you start to have distractions, then you're not focusing on the rock and how your foot is placed, or exactly how much you're like pinching small holds. And like rock climbing is very physical and very like mental, and so when I moved to Hawaii, I missed that a lot. There's not as good rock climbing in Hawaii, so freediving I think was that outlet for me, because freediving you absolutely need to be in tune with your body and your breath. You have to really like be able to calm your mind, because once you start to freak out underwater, then you're just going to be burning through your oxygen faster or something. Your CO2 starts to build even quicker, and you just get so nervous and scared, and that's not what you want to have happen if you're diving really, really deep. So yeah, I saw freediving, I think, as just like that physical outlet for me, because rock climbing used to be that, and then it turned into freediving, where I don't do as much yoga as I should, but freediving is that time that I can be just fully like quiet and relaxed, and I don't think about emails and phone calls that I need to take care of later. I can be fully present in this moment of diving. And yeah, recently I became a freedive instructor, which I've loved a lot. I love talking about diving. I'm sure sometimes during my classes, my students need to take a break to go to the bathroom, and I'm just keep like rambling on about the freediving, but I do love it, and I think it's something that's like healthy for people, even if you don't want to be competitive. Like I'm kind of taking it more into a competitive side now of freediving, but just teaching the science and telling people and like showing them like just with your face touching the water, you have certain receptors just like around your cheeks basically, that right as that starts to touch the water, we have a mammalian dive reflex that kicks in, and so it starts to slow down your heart rate. It starts to control your breathing. There's a lot of effects that happen, this short-term mammalian dive reflex that happens, the biggest being just the calming, the slowing of your heart rate. That I think once you unlock that, you know, freediving just, it becomes easier, but you just know that, oh man, yeah, right as my face touches the water, I'm going to be calm. So yeah.
That's interesting.
I've strayed a lot, but...
Thank Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So, are you ready to dive even deeper
Let's
now?
go. Yeah. I think we're just getting below the surface.
So we're about 50 feet now, and we're gonna dive even deeper. So, we talked about it before. I think one of the reasons why you're the person you are today was also because you had a, let's call it, not the easiest childhood. You became sick when you were how old?
12.
12, yeah. Can you share a little bit about that story? I know it's a rapid change in topic.
No, it's okay. Like you said, it definitely has like made me who I am today.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was 12, I started having really bad stomach cramps, and they lasted for almost a week. And I went to see lots of different doctors and lots of different appointments and scans and all kinds of things, trying to figure out what the stomach pain, like where the stomach pain was coming from. So finally we landed with some certain test and with a doctor, and they saw that my intestines had collapsed on themselves like a telescope. How a telescope, if you fold a telescope, it folds in on itself like 5 or 6 times. So one of my intestines did that. So they were like, oh, clearly this is what's causing this pain. So I remember getting put under for surgery, thinking it was, just like a kind of a minor, easy fix. And then I remember waking up and just a few days later, the doctors and my parents telling me that during surgery, they saw that I had a tumor. So I had cancer. And that I was going to have to be in the hospital now for the next 6 months. I was going to lose my hair, and I was going to get super weak, and I was going to have to go through chemo, and I wasn't able to play football that year, and wasn't able to participate in school like in a normal manner. And so, yeah, from what I thought was just a simple fix, definitely, waking up and then being told that, oh yeah, my life was definitely about to change. So I was super blessed and very fortunate going through chemotherapy. I stayed relatively healthy the entire time, which again is a huge blessing. I juiced a lot. So anyone out there, juicing is great. I do really think that helped me a lot. Just juicing every morning. But yeah, I lost my hair. I got super weak. I would basically stay in the hospital for 1 week, hooked up to an IV machine. So if I wanted to walk around or use the bathroom, like I had to grab my little cart and carry it with me. And so for the week I'd stay in the hospital, and then I'd go home for usually just a few days, have some time to rest, recover, and then I'd go back and they'd plug me back in to have more chemo. And 6 months went by. I was totally healthy afterwards. Since then, I do some tests I think now I'm like at every 5 years where I'll go in and they'll test again just to check my body and make sure basically that specific cancer hasn't come back, and then they can do some other checks. So that was definitely like a huge life event. And I think things that I don't remember even how deep we dove into it the last time. But I think the really big thing that changed me or stood out to me during my time when I had cancer, there were some poetic moments. The very first night that I ever got administered, I was roommates with, his name was Brandon. I was roommates with Brandon. Brandon was about 10 years older than me, maybe more, maybe even 15. I know he was probably closer to his 30s. And we even had one specific nurse, an older nurse. She was really cool. And so he and we were paired in the same room. This was even, years ago in these nice hospitals, you had to share rooms with people. And I don't remember the room number or, some of the super small details, but my very first night ever staying in the hospital with cancer, I was with Brandon. And it was just very poetic because you flash forward 6 months, and my very last night, I was in the same room with the same nurse with my same roommate, Brandon. And throughout that time, he and I got really close. We shared rooms a couple times. Sometimes we wouldn't be as fortunate, and I'd have to share a room with like a 2-year-old baby or something, and parents weren't always able to be around. And then you'd have a kid just crying all night, and it was so sad. Just to see kind of some of these things. But Brandon and we would always play video games together or watch movies or just talk, because what else do you do when you're having something just slowly dripped into your body all day, all week? And yeah, so the really big thing that changed in my life, I was young, right? I was 12, and Brandon was at the time, obviously way more successful than me, right? He had finished college and was dating a girl, and he had a solid career, set up in front of him, but he got cancer, and that very much impacted his life. He was in the hospital before me, and he ended up staying in the hospital after me. And there was a time that it looked like he was getting healthy, which was a huge blessing because he had been in the hospital for a long time. And so he got healthy enough, and him and his girlfriend at the time, they loved each other. They knew that they wanted to kind of commit to each other, so they got married. They had a whole ceremony and everything, but Brandon, he was still sick. He still didn't have his hair back. He was very weak. And I remember going to the wedding, and this was maybe a year later. So I had recovered fully. A year later, I went to his wedding, and watching him even just walk down the aisle, there was a point where he made it close to the end of the aisle, and he stumbled and he fell because his body was still so weak. But he married the girl of his dreams, right? And he went for everything in life, even at the sickest moment or something in his own life. He still went for that goal, right, of marrying the girl. And then it was a few months after they had gotten married, he went back into the hospital, and his body just became so weak that Brandon ended up passing away. And I know that I was 13 or 14 at the time, and I think just Brandon's story had a huge impact on me. And I think my big message, and I think the thing that I try to just show in my life, is I don't ever want to take things for granted. And I think a lot of people take health for granted. And I think, man, if you even just have a stuffy nose or a headache, you feel so down and in the trash and stuff. And it's man, we should always be taking for granted. We should always be appreciating the times that we do feel 100%, because when we just feel 99%, it is a huge, it's a huge ordeal, right? We feel so shitty even at 99% sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I just saw Brandon's life and saw that he was going for these things. And I even saw it as wow, I was blessed because I'm still here, but Brandon didn't make it. And why is that? And I don't want to spoil this gift that I've been given. And I do try to tell that to other people of if you are healthy, I mean, you could even have, I don't know, a messed up arm or a messed up leg, but the fact that your mind still works and that you can still do things, that is a lot more sometimes than what other people maybe have. And so for me, it was definitely just that living free of, what can I do? How can I inspire other people? And really nothing should hold me back, because I have just such this gift, which is a healthy body. And I think that so many other people have that as well, and they squander it. And yeah, I think they don't realize maybe how blessed they are.
Yeah. Very true. I think we always take things for granted until we don't have them anymore. And by starting to see and to feel grateful for this body, for this life, for this experience, for the lessons, for everything that makes us feel alive and be here, is a huge, huge step to have a happy life, right? It always starts with being grateful what you already have. And I think I remember the story. Is it the line on your arm, one of this?
Yeah. I've got a couple tattoos along my forearms, and one of them, I have 5 black lines that run around my forearms, and one of them is to remember Brandon, who had passed away. So the lines are to represent those who have passed away, and I learned just many lessons from Brandon, and so I like that I have my tattoo where it's visible, and I can kind of always be reminded of him in that way.
So beautiful. And when you go back to the moment, the day in the hospital where you woke up and you just thought it's going to be a normal surgery, and you heard the words saying from your doctors, from your parents, that they found a tumor, that you have cancer, what happened in your body in this moment, in your mind, in your feelings?
Good question, because I wasn't going to go into this. Because it's something that honestly, I can't explain. Because the way that it's funny because it took years of having this conversation with my dad, actually. And he was like, Josh, that never happened. So for years and years and years, I believed what I thought happened. And so for me, when I woke up, I remember waking up in the middle of like the hospital hallway because my room wasn't ready or something, right? I was very groggy. I had just come out of surgery, and I leaned over, or I rolled over, and I see my parents, and they were sitting on a bench next to me, and they were both crying. And I was like freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, I just came out of surgery. You know, why are they crying? I was like, oh guys, like, is something wrong? And my parents looked at me and, you know, really sad, but they were just like, hey, you know, Josh, the doctors, they saw that you have a tumor and you have cancer. And I never thought it was weird that they told me right away, right? But like, why would you ever tell some kid who's just coming out of surgery and he's all out of it? So I remember I went back to sleep because I was still, you know, just totally high on drugs just after surgery. And then when I woke up later, the doctor, my parents, they never told me like when I fully came out of the surgery. It wasn't until 3 or 4 days later that they came in and they told me. And the thing that I didn't realize that my dad told me is that my parents never told me in the hallway when they were crying. Like, that never happened. That I made that up or something.
Wow.
But for 5 days, or at least it was a few days, I knew and I believed that I had cancer and this is what was going to happen and I was just going to have to go through this. So when the doctors actually came in and told me, and with my parents standing there for the first time in real life, I was kind of emotionless because I knew what was about to happen. I had already been told. So, and yeah, it was funny because just my parents always said, they were like, yeah, Josh, you stayed so blank. Like, you didn't really show any emotions. I think they said that the most emotion I showed was when they said that I was going to lose my hair. For some reason, to me, that was...
Yeah, you have long hair.
Yeah, now I have long hair, and the plan is to donate it, but I really appreciate my hair now. But that was really what, like, tripped me up, was like, oh my gosh, I am going to lose my hair. But yeah, I was super just kind of calm, just knowing what was going on with my body.
And do you know why you knew?
No, I can't explain that. Not at all. And like I said, for years and years, it was really only... It was before I moved to Hawaii. It was 6 or 7 years ago that I had this conversation with my dad. That he told me, he was like, Josh, you've been wrong this entire time. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so crazy. That's so beautiful also. Somehow you knew.
Yeah.
And did you know you're gonna make it, or did you have this fear of dying, or like, how was this whole process for you being sick at such a young age?
I know I never had a fear of dying. And I mean, one, because I was also fortunate just with the type of cancer that I had, is very, very rare, but also very curable. Okay. There's some, you know, long lasting effects that, you know, maybe that could have been a thing, but even that, none of those things happened or came true. So there wasn't ever some worry. It was just like, oh boy, this is just a big roadblock now. Like, you know, I was 12. Yeah. So I mean, not that I have many responsibilities being at 12, but I was old enough to understand everything. Like, I wasn't too young. So it was definitely a big just roadblock in life of having to buckle down now for the next 6 months and go through a lot of crap.
But you knew you're gonna be healthy and it's gonna be all good.
Yeah. Okay. I was never worried. I don't think I ever had thoughts of... Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And what else did you learn through this massive thing, like at that age? One thing you shared with Brandon, that you appreciate your health much more and you're grateful for your body, but was there something you learned about yourself, or why this cancer happened? Like something, you know, that has shaped you to the person that you are today because of what happened?
So... I mean, it's definitely shaped me. And I think the big thing that I saw, and it was probably through my dad's friends. My dad he's a firefighter. And it was just so cool to see this family of all the different firefighters come around and like make us meals, or, mow our lawn because my parents didn't have time. And so just to see, I was this little 12-year-old kid, but to see so many people showing love in my life, and I think that they really inspired me to even just see like the burden of cooking amazing meals or helping my parents out. And so I think the other big thing that I learned was just wanting to try to inspire others in the things that I do. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if it was like, why did I get cancer? And
I mean,
don't know
maybe you don't
for...
know. I just heard some people, they get sick and in this process, they realize why they got sick in the first place.
I think I would say that I think having cancer absolutely shaped my life and changed my life for the better. And that if I had to do it again, obviously I don't know who I would have been without having cancer, but if I had to do it again, I would probably do it again because it was all things for the better. It definitely, there was no resentment to something or someone for getting cancer. Everything, it did change my life for the better.
So beautiful. You can see it that way and not seeing life as something that happens to you, but for you. So what would you like to share with the people who are listening? Something that's on your heart, something you really want to put out there and inspire people with? If there's one thing you could imagine you would die tomorrow, but there's one thing you want to leave in this world that people should know or should remember.
I think it's almost like kind of what we had spoken on earlier when I was talking about, moving to Hawaii. And I just think that, if there's something that's huge on your heart, something that you want to do in life, and if it's, for me, and it's easy for me to say because I'm so passionate about travel and just moving and travel, and I just remember when it came time for me to really decide if I was going to move to Hawaii or not, and it was clicking, purchase online. That was the scariest thing, but looking back, I'm so glad that I did it. And so I think the thing that I want to tell people or leave people with is just don't be so scared to make that leap of faith. Things fall into place, and if you have good community already, and if you move and you're so scared to leave your community, because I think that was even a big thing for me, my life was in Arizona, your community loves you. And if something doesn't work out in Hawaii, you're always welcome back. And it's a cliche thing to say, but it's Arizona will always be there for me. And it's true. I still have family and plenty of friends that if something ever did happen in Hawaii that I needed to leave, I always have a spot in Arizona. So just knowing that, maybe if something doesn't work out because it's not right for you, and I think you find that out soon, quickly, into maybe a big transition in life, if it's meant to be or not, that you'll always be able to go back with doors wide open, I guess. And I think you could even attest to that. Moving to Morea, you'd never even been here and you made the transition, and I think I've only known you now for just a short period of time, but to see even the growth that you've had here, it's you're meant to be here. You're definitely meant to spend some time here. You have a purpose here.
Oh. Thank you. Yeah, I totally resonate with your words and what you said, that we cannot allow our fear to hold us back from what we're supposed to do, because inside we all know what we have to do, right? But we get so caught up with our doubts and our fear and all the reasons why it could not work or it could be scary, that we don't take the leap of faith. But yeah, that's the best message that you just shared. Just do it.
Yeah, there's so many little cliche things to say, the whole YOLO and just do it, but there's still truth behind them.
Yeah, there's a reason why everyone repeats them.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for this conversation, Josh, for diving deep with me.
Yeah.
Without really knowing each other. There's one question I ask every podcast guest, and I didn't tell you on purpose because it has to come intuitively.
Oh my gosh, okay. Now I'm nervous again.
Okay, so imagine a younger version of yourself. You can close your eyes. Sometimes there pops up a child, sometimes there's a teenager. And something you have learned through your journey that you know now, but you didn't know back then, that would have helped you. Like, what would you tell your younger self that would have helped you during your journey?
The thing that I would tell younger Josh is to communicate better with people, and maybe even with yourself. And I don't hope that I don't take too long in this answer, but yeah, to communicate better with people. And let's go back even quickly to the having cancer. I felt like I lost a lot of emotions when I had cancer because it was like this big grown-up thing that happened to a 12-year-old boy, it kind of felt like. And people would say often, like, oh my gosh, like, I can only imagine what you're going through, and like, oh, like, I hope you feel okay, and all these things. And I got almost like some hard skin, some thick skin, I think, at times, because I was like, yeah, like, you don't know what I'm going through, and like, people don't understand. And I think that really did close me off for a while, and where I wouldn't communicate feelings. Or I mean, I think feelings is probably the best, because I wouldn't communicate exactly how I felt, because it's just like, what does somebody else care? Like, they don't know what I feel, they don't know what I'm going through, so I would just keep it to myself. So yeah, what I would tell younger Josh is to communicate more and better. I think that's a big lesson that I've been learning.
Are you still
the last
learning?
couple of years. Yeah, I'm still learning. Absolutely. Just trying to communicate better. And I mean, absolutely, because, how I think jokingly you said, oh, something you learned with girls. But absolutely, in relationships, to communicate better. It's key, I think. And I've communicated poorly. And, no good comes from that.
Yeah. But it takes a lot of courage, and it feels so scary if it's not what you're used to, because you have to be honest and vulnerable and share what society often calls weakness, which is actually your power. If you're vulnerable and authentic, people can connect to you so much deeper. Ah, Josh, thank you for this amazing conversation.
Yeah.
I loved having you here.
Thank you. Yeah. This is very inspiring for me, like I said, to start my own podcast and to make that leap.
When you come back to Morea, you will have your podcast.
Ah, okay. I like that. That should be the goal. Things to be working towards.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, too, for having me.
I hope you loved this episode as much as I did, and you feel inspired to take action, to take the leap of faith, and connect with Josh on Instagram and let us know how it inspired you and what you take out of this conversation. And I see you next week. Much love from the other side of the world.